Hi everyone, my name is Avery Knight and this is my debate partner.
Hi, I'm Lily Schul.
And today we'll be debating how affirmative action could be harmful. Affirmative action is often described as a policy of fairness, but in reality it replaces one form of discrimination for another. Instead of creating equality, it divides opportunity based on race, something civil rights movements fought to end. According to our article for the presentation, The Pros and Cons of Affirmative Action, the weak critics argue that affirmative action treats people differently based on skin color, which goes against the idea of merit-based opportunity and the constitutional promise of equal protection. One of the main criticisms the weak has for affirmative action is that it treats people differently based on their race or ethnicity. In practice, that means two applicants with similar qualifications may be judged on different standards depending on their racial background. Supporters might argue that this is done to promote diversity or correct past discrimination, but critics say it violates the core American principles of equal treatment under the law, a value protected by the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. So, when universities or institutions or employers use race as a deciding factor, opponents often argue that they're favoring some groups while disadvantaging others, purely based on race, not on merit or individual effort. These critics say that it's fundamentally unfair because it replaces historical discrimination with what they call reverse discrimination. A real-life court case and a clear example of this is the Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard 2023 case, where Asian American students argued that Harvard's admissions system was biased against them. Despite having higher test scores and grades, they were admitted at lower rates because of race-based preferences. The Supreme Court argued, ruling that Harvard's use of race violated the Equal Protection Clause, showing how affirmative action can lead to reverse discrimination, punishing one group in the name of diversity. Reinforcing this, in another article by the Heritage Foundation states, anytime an individual is granted preferential treatment based on race, opportunities are denied to others who may just be as qualified for simply having the wrong skin color. This kind of preference doesn't promote fairness. It punishes the wrong people and fuels resentment. Over time, it creates racial tension rather than unity. Although affirmative action is meant to help, it can be harmful. The Heritage Foundation provides a vivid example. Ashley feared ever having a bad day, lest her peers think that she got accepted because of her skin color. This shows affirmative action can stigmatize its beneficiaries, making them feel like accomplishments are not earned and causing others to doubt their merit. In another source by The Atlantic, it echoes this concern by noting that many minorities students feel that they have to prove they belong, which undermines self-confidence in peer relationships. In the end, affirmative action reduces people to racial categories rather than recognizing their individual talent. The Heritage Report puts it clearly. The values of diversity movement are only skin deep. They rely on discriminatory stereotypes and gross generalizations. So, while affirmative action may intend to make things fairer, it actually distorts fairness, creating new forms of discrimination, social division, and mistrust. That's it for my side of why affirmative action is harmful and why it doesn't create fairness. And now I'm going to push it over to my debate partner, Lily.
Our second topic is inequality and why affirmative action fails to solve the real problem. Affirmative action is also harmful because it fails to truly address inequality and in some cases makes it worse. According to the weak, researchers Richard Sandard and Stuart Taylor Jr. found that affirmative action often benefits upper middle class minority students and not those from genuinely disadvantaged backgrounds. In other words, the people receiving the boost are often the ones who need it the least. The Atlantic expands on this, explaining that class inequality has now surpassed racial inequality in determining who gets left behind. It argues affirmative action now mostly helps well-off minorities while leaving behind the poor students of all races. That means a poor white or Asian student might face more obstacles than a wealthy minority student, but can still be overlooked because race, which is not a need, is the deciding factor. Our second topic is inequality and why affirmative action fails to solve the real problem at hand. Affirmative action is also harmful because it fails to truly address inequality and in some cases makes it worse. According to the weak, researchers Richard Sandard and Stuart Taylor Jr. found that affirmative action often benefits upper middle class minority students and not those from genuinely disadvantaged backgrounds. In other words, the people receiving the boost are often the ones who need it the least. The Atlantic expands on this, explaining that class inequality has now surpassed racial inequality in determining who gets left behind. It argues affirmative action now mostly helps well-off minorities while leaving behind the poor students of all races. This means that a poor white or Asian student might face more obstacles than a wealthy minority student, but can still be overlooked because race, not need, and because race and not the need of the student is the deciding factor. This shows that affirmative action is outdated and misdirected, focusing on identity instead of the real root of inequality, poverty. Furthermore, these policies can hurt the very students they intend to help. The Week and The Atlantic both discuss the mismatch effect, which is when students admitted under lower standards struggle to keep up academically. Many of these students experience lower grades, frustration, or even drop out because they lack ability, but not because they lack ability, but because they are placed in an environment mismatched for their preparation. As The Atlantic notes, by placing students in academic settings where they are less prepared than their peers, affirmative action may set them up for failure rather than success. Lastly, the Heritage Foundation points out that modern inequality can't be solved by focusing on race. They say in today's increasingly pluralistic society, race usually does not, and certainly should not, determine what obstacles individuals have had to overcome or advantages they have received. Overall, this highlights the moral and practical cost of keeping race-based preferences in place long after their purpose has faded. Instead of lifting everyone fairly, affirmative action now divides, stigmatizes, and overlooks the true sources of inequality.
For our closing statement, we just want to say affirmative action may have started as a temporary tool for correct historical injustices, but has evolved to a permanent system of preferences that often causes more harm than good. It undermines fairness by judging people based on race instead of merit, and it fails to reduce inequality, benefiting the privileged while stigmatizing the disadvantaged.
As the Heritage Foundation warns, treating people differently because of race carries lasting moral and practical costs. To truly achieve equality, we must focus on opportunity based on individual need and ability, not identity. That's what fairness and true equality should mean.
Thank you so much for your time, and we hope you have a great day.
Hi, my name is Timothy Hughes. I'm also arguing for why affirmative action is helpful. Affirmative action does not simply mean that you admit a bunch of people of color just because. It means ensuring that all individuals from all backgrounds have a fair chance at succeeding in a system that has historically favored certain groups. If admissions were simply based on racial quotas or anything like that, the disparities or the disbursement of students throughout that school would be even greater, and true diversity would not be achieved. A generally diverse campus would benefit everyone, not only because it looks good, but because it encourages positive outcomes. Things like creativity, collaboration, and critical thinking would be improved. Studies have shown that students who learn in diverse environments are better prepared to work in multicultural settings and approach problems from multiple perspectives.
I'm Farouk Elias, and I'll be arguing that affirmative action is helpful for the U.S. Affirmative action is basically just a policy that was made to ensure equal opportunity among everyone of all races, and it was specific, or at least specifically to education and employment. It was first introduced in the civil rights movement as a direct response of racial discrimination and systemic barriers faced by people of color and just other minority groups in the United States. It's more than just diversity in a college campus, whether it's a transcript or resume or personal background. It was just making sure that everyone was actually qualified to get into or be whether to get into a college or to be employed, to make sure that everyone was accounted for and that they were actually qualified to do whatever they were trying to do, and they weren't getting in just because they were a certain race or they knew a certain person, and etc. According to the Week, eliminating affirmative action would likely lead to a significant decline in racial and cultural diversity among colleges or just places of higher education, and it would just reverse decades of work and progress and weaken the educational environment in those higher education places. And it would just limit the range of perspectives and experiences that would make a classroom discussion just what it was, because not everyone's thinking the same way. Given that certain racial and ethnic groups are still underrepresented today, maintaining affirmative action is essential to promote fairness and inclusion and equal access to opportunity for everyone in college.